around 20 years into my career, I got disillusioned with hairdressing, burnt out. I was depressed. It's really around permission to have work-life balance for women. So this started to really creep up and I had big episodes of burnout. It's total exhaustion, but it's physical exhaustion, it's emotional exhaustion. I started to notice was things I'd committed to in December with my friends and family started to feel like a chore.
Sometimes working in the hair and beauty industry is exhausting. We have to have our hair and our makeup, nails done all of the time. We have to have a smile on our face. We have to be sociable, ready to chat to a client for their whole appointment when we'd rather just be quiet. And then we have to have our team to look after, checking in with the accountant, the landlord, and everyone else before we go home and do it all over again with our friends and family. It can feel exhausting. The thing is, if we keep going the way that you're going, you'll eventually reach burnout, which then has a roll-on effect for physical ailments, even depression. But it shouldn't. And then as we roll into the silly season, we're busier than ever. So now, more than ever, is the time of year to start checking in with your mental health, which is why I'm really excited to have this chat today with Hayley. Now, she's the founder of The Resilient Hairdresser, and she's here with me on the podcast today, and we're chatting about stress, burnout, and how to avoid it, particularly at Christmas time. Hey, and she's awesome. This is a great episode. But really quickly before we start and meet Hayley, I wanted you to know that this episode is brought to you by Shortcuts, your leading Salon software provider. Shortcuts have an exclusive offer for you for Salon Owners Collective podcast listeners only. I'm going to share it with you at the end of this episode. Okay, let's get into the episode, how to avoid burnout at Christmas time.
Hayley, thank you so much for joining me on the Salon Owners Collective podcast. Pleased to have you here.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I absolutely love doing podcasts, so thanks for asking me.
Well, why don't we start with who the heck are you, Hayley? Who are you? Where are you in the world? What do you do? And how did you get to be doing it?
Okay, I'm going to start with where I am. I'm in Manchester in the north of England. If you might tell by my accent if you're familiar with Coronation Street. I'm from there. I run a business called The Resilient Hairdresser, which is focused on the mental health and well-being of hairdressers, basically anyone in the hair and beauty industry, really. But hairdressing is my background. And so I'll tell you how I ended up doing what I do. And so I was a hairdresser for around 30 years. I stopped hairdressing just as we were coming out of the last lockdown in the UK. So 3 years ago, something like that, I lose track. I stopped. That's when I did my last head of hair. But around 20 years into my career, I got disillusioned with hairdressing, burnt out. I was depressed, and I got a therapist. And this was a big turning point in my life for lots of reasons. A, because she worked wonders with my depression and my mental health. But B, I decided I wanted to be a therapist. And so that's what I did. I was disillusioned in the industry and I thought I'm gonna retrain to do something else. I thought I'm at the peak of my earning power. I think I'm gonna do it now. And so I retrained to be a psychotherapist. It took 4 years. That's what they make it take so long because they want you to be in therapy yourself for a long time. And so I retrained. It's so funny. I retrained. I talked about myself for a lot. And then I quit the industry and I worked as a psychotherapist. I had my own practice and I also worked in, we call it a sixth form college. It's like 16 to 19-year-olds, and I was like a college counselor as well. And so I did that and I loved it and it was brilliant. But after about 5 years, I found the job lonely. And around this time, a friend of mine with a salon begged me to come and help them and do some colour because their colourist had left. And I was a colour specialist when I was a hairdresser. And so I said I would do a day for them to help them out. And this is when everything really changed. When I went back into the salon, I loved it. And I didn't love it when I left. I was pretty unhappy. But when I came and did this day, I really liked it. And slowly I started to realize I was happier on the days I was hairdressing than when I was a therapist. And so which was, mind blowing to me. And I started to do more hair and less therapy. And I really started to think about, why is it different this time round? And I realized that the skills I'd learned as a therapist were serving me amazingly as a hairdresser. And I thought to myself, I think I've got something new to bring to the hair industry. I need to figure out how to package this. And so I wrote a workshop and I tried it out on people I knew. And it grew from there essentially into the business that it is now, the Resilient Hairdresser, which is online coaching, online courses. I talk on stages about mental health for the hair industry, events. I still do my workshops at salons. I coach around leadership, burnout, changes in your career. Like, if you're a hairdresser with a problem, I'll talk to you. That's what I always say. And if I'm not the right one, I'll send you to somebody who's going to serve you better. But that's what I do. I spend my days talking to hairdressers and making reels quite a lot as well, Larissa, making silly
The
reels
good
to make
stuff.
hairdressers laugh. Yeah. So that's what I do. Did I answer everything?
I love that. I love the transition. I love the journey that you've been through. And now I love that you're coming back and serving the industry specifically. So
Yeah, because I miss
amazing.
hairdressers, like I always liked hairdressers and I like the camaraderie of other hairdressers, we're fun. And I really miss that as a therapist, 'cause it's a very, very lonely career. And so what I love now is that I'm in the middle. I get to use my brain like a therapist, which I love, but I get to spend time talking to hairdressers. So I feel I finally found the perfect balance for me in the middle.
I love that. That's so good. Well, let's talk a little bit about mental health for the hair industry. Specifically, I'm really interested in what's the difference between being stressed out and being burnt out? Because I've only just recently learned that there is a difference and I think it's important. So, what are your
Yeah,
thoughts
it's
on
a
that?
great question. It's a great question. I would think about it like this. I think stress is a reaction to something in the moment or anticipating something that's going to happen, like worry. Like anxiety is defined as fear of the future. And so anxiety and stress, kind of the same, but stress, it can often be, I'm stressed because my client doesn't like her hair. I'm worried because Janet's in tomorrow. I'm stressed because I've got to go for Sunday dinner with my family on Sunday. It's that kind of thing, isn't it? Whereas I think about burnout as a much bigger picture thing. Burnout is an accumulation of stress that you are unable to manage over a long period of time. And it's also about a deficit of energy. And so I describe burnout in this way. I'll see if I can remember it now. It's total exhaustion, but it's physical exhaustion, it's emotional exhaustion, it's a mental exhaustion. And so it's more of an accumulative issue, whereas stress is a reaction to one thing. It might build up, it ends up being a few things and then it can turn into chronic stress. I heard something really interesting, which was around adrenaline. And when we live on adrenaline for too long, this eventually becomes chronic stress in the body because stress starts to have physical effects on us. It starts to affect your immune system. You start getting sick more. When you say, I'm run down, this is a buildup of stress. And I think as hairdressers, I'll speak for myself. I think in the first part of my career, I lived on adrenaline all the time. I had no idea. Like, I needed that rush of adrenaline to manage 3 clients at once because I was triple booked, but I had no skills and no awareness that I needed to bring that down at any point. And so what happened was I started to live in sort of a survival mode of constant anxiousness and always feeling like I'd forgotten something. This sort of state of hypervigilance that never seemed to go off. And so this started to really creep up and I had big episodes of burnout periodically. And this is what I see with a lot of hairdressers. So I think that's the difference in a simple way. One's immediate and one's a more of a long-term effect.
That makes so much sense. And how you explained that hypervigilance that really like, oh yes, I understand that.
Yeah, we
And that
know
living
that.
on adrenaline and feeling like you're just on all the time, because you
Yes.
kind of need to be on in the salon.
Well, you
You know,
need
you
it as the
turn your
hairdresser.
face on. Yep.
We
Yep.
call it
That's
putting
right.
your human suit on. Me and my friend, get your human suit on. Become social. But it's also like managing 1 or 2 clients at a time, keeping your eye on what your assistant's doing. Oh, there's that one in reception that's half an hour early looking at her watch. There can be multiple things going on. And so that split focus requires adrenaline and energy, but we've got to learn to bring it down.
Yeah, I like that you said that too, because there's something fun and addictive about feeling like that. I'm on and I'm ready to go, and there's the energy in the salon, and I've got 3 clients, and I love that feeling. But you're right, it's about managing it, and because you can't live like that
Because there's
forever.
a hangover from it, though, is the problem. It comes with a
Yeah.
hangover, which is less energy. And then I always think living on adrenaline's like borrowing energy from tomorrow. You've got to pay it back at some point. And when I was younger, I was no good at paying it back. I just pushed on through and partied and, did whatever to get through. And then I started to pay the price more and more and more as the years went by. And it started to show up in physical ailments and stuff like that as well. But it can be addictive chaos, I think. I've noticed it in myself sometimes in the middle of a crisis. I think I'm thriving.
Yeah, yeah.
And I
Okay,
think
so
so
what
many
is
of us
that?
are like that.
Yeah, what is that? What is that addiction, or why do we love that feeling? What's that about?
Oh, it's the dopamine. The dopamine hits. You get a dopamine hit with arguing, crisis, drama, stress is drama. And so I think I certainly did this for a long time as a hairdresser. And I speak to people every day that do this. They're relying on the adrenaline and the chaos feeling to get that energy because they haven't gotten it, because they are burnt out or heading there. They're running on a deficit of energy. So they're always borrowing. And so, like sometimes when there's a deadline looming and all of a sudden you find the energy to do something, hairdressing can be a little bit like that all day. And so I think some people book themselves up quite intensely because they know it brings the energy. I don't think people are doing this consciously, but I think subconsciously. I hear hairdressers say to me all the time, I love it when it's crazy, when it's manic. I get tired when I get gaps. They're terrified of gaps and even booking a lunch because the energy will crash and then they can't get back up. Mhm. Yeah. It's about learning to manage your energy in a much healthier fashion because it works, but it doesn't work forever. You will start to pay the price probably around about, if it hasn't hit you by your mid to late 30s, it's coming soon. But it was hitting me in my early 30s, to be honest, if not before.
Okay, so I see there's a sort of small thread of addiction here, addiction to dopamine, but some people might get addicted to drugs or alcohol instead. Like people are looking for something to hold them up if they're not managing their energy
Yeah.
themselves. Would this be
Mhm.
true?
I think so. I think it's really what I think it's about is chasing energy and
For
feeling
sure.
different. I mean, I think I'm not an addiction expert, but I know that people taking drugs and drinking, it's about changing how you feel in a very fundamental way. I want to feel different than this. But I think, I myself have got ADHD. I was diagnosed last year along with every other middle-aged women in the world at the moment, but it's turning up that lots of hairdressers have got ADHD, and our industry is perfect for an ADHD brain. But we're very predisposed to chase dopamine because that's how we find our energy. I learned a lot about this. But I really think this sort of addiction phrase that you're using is us finding ways to have the energy to manage to get
Mhm.
through the days that we have. I
Yeah,
think it's
I agree.
all about that.
I can see that sort of correlation there, and yeah, that's really interesting. Okay, so managing energy up and down, like it's fine to be up, but we've got to learn to be down and then maybe come back up and down
Yeah,
as we
yeah,
need.
yeah.
Is there something there around setting boundaries for ourselves, or is it just a better understanding of energy flow? What are your
I
thoughts?
think it's both. I think it's both because I think we can know it and not do it,
Yes.
So I think, you know what I mean? I always used to say, I have to understand it here and then it's got to drop to my heart before I'm actually doing it. I know loads of stuff, but I'm not doing it. Loads of things that are good for me that I've not managed to integrate into my life yet. So I think it's both. I think, I always sort of say this, you can't eat healthy if you don't know what a healthy food is. Like you can't do things that are good for you if you don't know what they are. So I do think we need to get educated around how our energy works. But I also think definitely boundaries. And I think it's boundaries with ourselves quite a lot. We talk a lot in this industry about boundaries with clients. And I think, yeah, I'm all for it, obviously. But I also think that boundaries with ourselves is the hardest, the absolute hardest. And I think that that's a big part of managing our energy, as well as having boundaries with clients and not squeezing people in and constantly extending your hours. It's also about making time for the things that recharge your batteries, making sure that you have a long enough of a time to actually fully come down and rest, feel recharged and then get back up instead of relying on having to stay up because you're too scared of the crash. You know what I mean? So I think it's that.
Okay, well, we're kind of, as this episode is coming out, we're in the lead up to the really crazy Christmas period. I know that's like a epic part of every hairdresser's year.
It's the
Let's talk a little bit about
version for the rest of the year.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about setting some boundaries around coming into that time when we're likely to cram clients, work extra hours. What are 2 or 3 things that we should leave this podcast with and go, right, I know it here in my head. I'm making it work in my heart. What should we be doing to set some boundaries at this time of year?
I always say this to people, like, have a think about last year and what didn't go well. Like, what made you miserable last year? And try not to do that. Now, as this episode comes out, people are going to be in the thick of it. They're already fully booked. They'll be in the middle of the thing. And so it's not that useful to give people stuff to do. Should have done this. However, one thing I would be thinking about is as you're going through this Christmas period and you're coming up against decisions you've made that you regret, write them down. And, I always say things like write yourself a letter and put it in your diary for next September. And when September comes and you're looking at your hours for Christmas, or have a little read of that and remind yourself that you hated doing 4 late nights. It wasn't great for you, your family, and your sanity. Things like that. So I do think there is something about, but I think we're trained to forget, that they say with with childbirth, women are programmed to forget how much it hurt. That's why they manage to have more than one. I think there's something about Christmas and hairdressers that's the same. We kind of just think it'll be all right. And then we go, oh no, I remember now. I don't like doing extra late nights or whatever. So, going forward, reflects on what's happening. But in the now, if you're listening to this in the middle of, Christmas busyness, I think really try and think about looking after your energy massively and what responsibilities can you just give to someone else? I always like to remind people this as well. Christmas is actually 3 weeks for hairdressers. It's not a 4-week. It's not a big month. It's 3. So it's shorter, which always made me feel better. But I think for some people, not socializing in December helps them with their energy battery. It did for me. Some people be horrified at that. But actually what I started to notice was things I'd committed to in December with my friends and family started to feel like a chore. And so eventually I realized once we get past mid-December, I'm not coming out, folks. Don't invite me. I don't want to come because it feels like a job.
Hey, Larissa here, just popping in the middle of this episode because I wanted to check, 1, are you enjoying this episode so far? It's pretty good, eh? I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for joining me each week on this podcast, but super quick, I wanted to share some exciting news with you. Your leading Salon software has an exclusive offer for you. And if you're listening to this Salon Owners Collective podcast episode, which clearly you are, hello, they are offering you implementation and onboarding of any of their Salon software packages for free, only for you.
Whether you need an all-in-one software to manage your business or you want to switch from your current Salon software, Shortcuts is going to help you out. Now, you could save anywhere from $400 to $700 depending on the package that best suits your salon. So if you're excited, need software, wanted to change your software, I have the link for you in the show notes of this very episode. I'll pop the details there on how you can implement Shortcuts into your salon and get the exclusive Salon Owners Collective podcast offer just for you. All right, that's enough for me. Let's get back to the episode.
I just dread it. Like I want to sit in a dark room watching TV and really taking care of myself and not spending any more of my social battery. And so I think things like permission to not be the life and soul of the party outside of work, because we really have to turn things up at Christmas. So I think permission to not squeeze people in who are disorganized. Your appointments are your appointments. And I just think no one's going to die if they have to wait for their highlights till January. Like no one's ever died of roots as far as I know. I just think, I reward organized people, that's what I say. I reward organized clients and I don't reward disorganized people, because when you reward people by squeezing them in, they never learn. And then they always have to be squeezed in, I really think it's this is the message I would really like hairdressers to know. It's okay to look after yourself at Christmas, and it's okay for you to have a Christmas as well. It's okay for you to take time to prepare your Christmas. And I think if we don't allow time to organize our Christmases and whatever other responsibilities we've got, we will start borrowing energy, and your body will want it back as soon as you break. And you'll get sick, because who's not? I used to get tonsillitis every January for about 20 years. It was absolutely insane. I was so poorly every January because I just went full pelt. I mean, sometimes this was not because I wanted to, it was because of the culture where I worked. And sometimes I was self-employed and doing it to myself. It's across the board. But I would just work too hard, not look after myself and pay for it and be sick. And I see it constantly. And so I think it's about just finding little pockets and asking for what you need from your partner and your family. Like, I'm not cooking in December, gang. I'm just putting it out there. I don't cook in December. Things like that. I'm not doing it. Hand things over. I
Yeah, I love that.
Things. Yeah.
I think my favorite thing that you said was, you essentially said, don't be responsible for other people not being organized.
Yes.
I think that, we take on like, oh, my client, she's going to miss out. And because we care that people look good and feel good about their hair, and we are their hair. And so we take on this responsibility that even if you're organized, it's my responsibility to care for you and move things around.
It's my responsibility to find you an appointment. It's yours to book it.
Yeah.
And
I think that's...
Yeah, one of the traits of people pleasers is an over responsibility for other people's feelings and behaviours, and I think that's what you summarised really.
Yeah, I think if we take away nothing else from this podcast but that, and take that back into for those that are people pleasing, I think thankfully we're in a time where that's more acceptable, and we're getting more comfortable with having some boundaries for ourselves, and clients are starting to accept that a little bit more than they used to. And so I'm grateful for that.
I'm all for it. I do. I think so. I think there is a real culture shift happening in the hair industry. I think the younger generations are much quicker to adapt to that. Whereas I think people like me, the Gen Xers and upwards, we were trained. This is how I think about it. I mean, I don't know, I'll be interested to see what you think about this, but I feel like I was trained in a time where the culture wasn't quite as healthy. It was like you're succeeding if you work through your lunch, all of that kind of crackers. And I think some people just feel bad. They can't quite get rid of it. even though they know in their head they're allowed to look after themselves now. It's like it's ingrained. And I speak to hairdressers who are self-employed and they can't stop because it's ingrained. And so I think there is an age thing a little bit, where,
Agree.
yeah,
Agree. I have this kind of tension with myself around my children, and the tension is like they actually sometimes have better boundaries than I did, and so but there's still this part of me that's like, but what do you mean you're not really working hard and going crazy and going to kill yourself working? And and I kind of want to go, you're just being a bit lazy, and then I go, hang on a minute. If I was as smart as you are, when I wouldn't have burnt out or all of those things. And so I had this little bit of tension of like, are you lazy or are you actually smart? Not really sure.
yeah. Have you got a work-life balance, or are you
Yeah.
lazy? I'm just
You're
not
not old
sure.
enough for that. How
And
dare
I
you?
really think it is.
But-
I think the messages we receive as young people can be really hard to work past. They often pop up first, and then you have to go, oh, hang on, do I still believe that? Which is what you're doing, which is fun.
Yeah, that's right. You have to reassess everything. And I think it's good ultimately. All right. Well, look, Hayley, I love your energy. I loved this conversation. I love that you're supporting the industry in mental health, stress, burnout, and all of those things, and making sure we're looking after ourselves, because it means ultimately that the industry can perform better, be happier. People are going to stay in the industry for longer. So I salute
Exactly
you for
that.
that.
Like, have a long career. I just
Yeah.
think that's the thing. I got really tired of watching talented hairdressers leave the industry because they were exhausted and overwhelmed. I thought, what a waste. And so that's really what I wanted to address.
Yeah, and I love that you're doing that. All right. Well, what you're a business owner? What is a book or a podcast or some kind of resource that you've had your hands on that you think all salon owners should get their hands on? What do you think?
I've got a few. I'm gonna quickly whip through a few. There's a podcast called Project Me by an American coach called Tiffany Carter. And when I was setting up my business, I was listening to her on repeat, and I still go and listen to her every now and again. And I've had a coaching session with her once, and she's fantastic and she's fun. I like her. I think she's great. And so, yeah, Project Me with Tiffany Carter. That's a great podcast. There's a book called Chill and Prosper. I forget what she's called now. Oh, she's a big money mindset coach from Australia.
Yep, I know.
What's she
Yep.
called?
Long blonde hair.
If I go to
I
my
know
email,
exactly.
oh,
I know exactly.
Lordy.
We'll put the
You can
we'll
work
put the
on
link
remembering that.
in-
I can't
Yep,
think.
I know exactly
what
who you
is she
mean.
called? Begins with D. DDT.
Denise
Duffield
Duffield.
Thomas. Yeah, she has a book called Chill and Prosper, which I think is excellent. It's really around permission to have work-life balance for women. So I really love that. And then I'm going to shamelessly plug my podcast, which I run with my friend Maddie Cook. She focuses on sort of money and pricing in the industry and mental health. And so between us, we have a podcast called Coffee Isn't Lunch. And we talk about all the tough stuff of the industry, the other side of things. Mental health and money are tricky. And so we talk about that. And so take a listen to us as well. We're good.
I love that. That's really great. Now, what is a mantra or maybe a quote that you have that you think about often running your own business
Do you know,
or mental health?
I've got two. The one that immediately springs to mind that I think about a lot, and I must say it 12 times a day to people, is you teach people how to treat you. And it's, you teach people how to treat you through what you allow and what you tolerate is the full sentence. And so I think it's a really good depiction of boundaries. When you keep allowing people to be squeezed in last minute, what you're saying is, this is okay for me, and they will carry on. And so if it's not okay for you, don't do it. And then they will learn, oh, that's not okay. She won't squeeze me in, so I better organize myself, And so I'm a big fan of that one. And then there's one I got from Denise Duffield Thomas, which is I serve, I deserve. And I really like that because it's around feeling confident in charging for your services. And I think that can be tough for hairdressers sometimes. I think the blur that we have in our industry between friend and client is so blurry that it affects people's money mindset and eventually affects their income and standard of living. And I think that's a problem. And so I love I Serve, I Deserve.
I love that. All right. Amazing. Well, look, thank you so much, Hayley. I really appreciated your time.
It's a pleasure.
Make sure the
It was
links
a great time.
to those podcasts are on the show notes of this episode. And keep doing what you're doing. It's amazing.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Well, Hayley, that was a great episode to kick off December, and I totally agree about setting boundaries with your clients, especially at this time of year at Christmas time. You also can't serve clients in January, February, even March if you completely burn yourself out in December. So set some boundaries. Don't do squeezies. Remember to look after yourself. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this episode and you have the confidence to be firm with those boundaries, maybe even gaining a little bit of clarity, realize, oh my God, I'm actually at burnout. I need a break. Take the break. Take the break. Big thank you, Hayley. Really enjoyed you joining me on the Salon Owners Collective podcast. And that's a wrap from us. Ciao for now. Till next week.